Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel Tech with Yashwant. In this video, let us see how we can automate our AWS MSK Kafka cluster with Terraform. So this will be a complete guide. I will also provide you the link to this blog and also the code in the description box below. Please feel free to check that out. So in my previous video, we walked through setting up an AWS MSK cluster manually using the AWS console. We did click all the buttons that we required and then created an MSK cluster. It took a lot of time to create it, but it's a great tool for learning, but it's not repeatable or scalable and it's not easy to manage. So that's the reason why today we are going to take it to the next level with infrastructure as code, that is Terraform. So we will use Terraform to define our entire MSK environment, which includes VPC, subnets, security groups, IAM roles, and the MSK cluster. And even we will create the client EC2 instance in a single set of configuration file. So with a few simple commands, you can create, update, or destroy the entire setup. So what we will be building in this particular project is that firstly, we will create a VPC where your MSK cluster and the EC2 instance, which will act as your Kafka client or producer or consumer. And we will also set up all the necessary internet gateway, route tables, etc. And we will create a secure MSK cluster and an EC2 instance, which will have Kafka installed with authentication mechanism. And we'll create IAM roles and security group that allows EC2 instance to securely communicate with MSK cluster. So all of this that we have talking about, it's already done with the manual process in my previous video. Please feel free to check that out first because you will understand what exactly we are trying to do in this video. So talking about this part, there are few prerequisites which are required. So before you begin, make sure you have the following prerequisites installed. Firstly, you should have an AWS account. In the AWS account, you should create a user and have the AWS CLI installed on your local machine. Once you have that, go ahead and configure the AWS CLI by typing AWS configure, and you will have to provide the access key and the secret access key. So once you provide the secret access key and access key, so the Terraform will be able to authenticate to your AWS account and can work along easily. After that, the next important tool that you have to download is Terraform itself. So I've given you the commands which will work at the moment, but I will always recommend you to check the official documentation on the Terraform docs. So check the website, and depending on your operating system, go ahead and install Terraform. And it will work on all three famous operating systems, Mac, Windows, and Linux. You can check or get the copy of your command from here. Also make sure to check the Terraform version by just typing Terraform -- version. So now what I've done is I've given you all the code in this particular GitHub repository. So you can open this, and in here, if you go inside Terraform folder, you will see something called as MSK cluster with VPC EC2 client. So if you open this file, you have all the configuration that are required in order to work along. So what I've done is I've cloned this particular repository on my local machine and I've added here. So now let us go ahead and understand what exactly we are doing in this particular configuration file. So this block of code, we are defining the Terraform provider, which is our AWS, and the version is 5.0. And then we are mentioning the provider and the region, which is US East 1. And we are getting the availability zone details here, which is available. So we got that information and we are storing that in data object, and we are using Amazon Linux for EC2 client. So that's why I'm getting the AMI for my particular account by using this data block, data object. So it remains the same for you. So if you are working along, if you use this particular data object, it will get the Amazon Linux image for that particular AMI and have it handy. Then we are creating the VPC itself. If you see here, I'm creating a VPC with the name MSK VPC. Although it's a logical naming, here it's the tag. So MSK VPC is the name. This is the CIDR, and I'm enabling DNS host name and the DNS support. So these two are crucial. Next, I'm also creating an internet gateway to make sure that it has got internet access. So as I will be downloading Kafka client and all those things, it requires internet access. So I'm adding that here. Next, I'm creating 3 subnets. If you see here, MSK subnets, the count is 3, and this is my VPC. The CIDR range is defined here, and I'm using count.index plus 1 for my CIDR block, and the availability zone, I'm fetching it from the data object that I previously created. And map public on launch, I've set it to true because I want this to be a public internet, public subnet. Now we have the route table as well. So I'm creating the route table here with the name, and CIDR block is 0.0.0. I'm for this CIDR block, I'm routing the route via AWS Internet Gateway, which we created in the previous step. So if that is clear, the next step is to associate that route table which we are creating here to the VPC itself or the subnet itself. So if you see here, we are doing that here in this step. And for my EC2, I want a key pair to be created. So I'm creating a key pair here, AWS key pair, and MSK client key pair here. So this will be downloaded or created in the directory where you are working along, right? So next we have the private file created here. If you see here, the TLS private key, it will have the file permission of 400, and it will be created in the same working directory with the name MSK client key.pem. So if you see here, I do not have any PEM file now. So once I create this, you will see the PEM file added. Next, we are creating the security group for MSK. So this is what all the ports we are adding from port 0 to port 0. I'm allowing all the CIDR blocks here, and this is my security group for MSK. Of course, you can fine tune this security group later, but for this demonstration, I'm going with this approach. So of course, if you are deploying it for a production workload, so you will have to fine grain the IP addresses only that are required in order to work along with your MSK cluster. Next, I'm also creating a separate security group for my EC2 instance, which will act as my Kafka client, and I'm allowing port number 22 as I will be logging into that server, and I'm also allowing 0 to 0 -1 port, and this is the name of the security group. And here is my security group rules. So basically, for the MSK security group, I'm allowing all the traffic from my EC2 security group and the other way around, right? So that's how I am doing it. Next, I'm creating an IAM role for my EC2 instance, and this is the policy that I'm attaching. If you see here, this is an assume role, and this is my IAM policy. So it will allow Kafka cluster connect, alter cluster, describe cluster. So I've given the fine-grained access. You can also provide instead of star, you can provide your Kafka cluster ARN. So that is also fine. Next, after creating the role, I need to attach that role to a particular EC2 instance. So I'm doing that here, right? And I'm also doing the attachment for the instance profile here. Next, finally, I'm creating the MSK cluster itself. If you see here, the cluster name is this, the Kafka version of the cluster is this one, the number of brokers is 3, and these are the information about the broker node info, like the instance type, the subnets, the security group, and the storage information. I'm giving it 100, but if you want to reduce it, you can do that as well. And client authentication, I want IAM based authentication, so I'm setting SASL, IAM is equal to true, and unauthenticated also I'm allowing for the demonstration purposes. And encryption info, I'm using a TLS plain text in the cluster, so I'm just setting that to true. So if you do not understand what these are, I would recommend you to check out my previous video where I've configured everything manually. There I've explained all the details in detail, right? Next, I'm creating an EC2 instance, which is of Amazon Linux, right? So this is my instance type, t2.micro, key pair is this one, VPC security group, subnet ID, instance profile, which we created in the previous step, and the AMI, which is Amazon Linux. So basically, if you remember in my previous video, we had installed few things, which is Java, we installed Kafka, we installed IAM authentication, AWS MSK IAM authentication, and then we created a file called client.properties, and we added all the details. So rather than doing it manually, so we are doing that as a user data. So if you see here, first I'm updating the system, then I'm installing Java, then I'm getting the Kafka client installed, then I'm downloading the jar file, AWS MSK IAM authentication jar file. Then I'm creating a file with the name client.properties and adding these details, right? So as soon as the instance will create, all these things will be downloaded and you will have all the Kafka installed. Next, I'm getting the outputs which are important, like the VPC ID, the subnet ID, the MSK cluster ARN, the bootstrap server details, the instance ID, EC2 public IP address, and the key pair path. So all these are required in order for me to work along. So now all you have to do is open the terminal. Let me open the terminal here. Okay, so I'm inside my folder where exactly this code is present. So let me type in Terraform init. I'll hit enter. So it says Terraform initialized in an empty directory. Okay, so rather I'll get inside the folder called Terraform where exactly my file is present. Okay, so let me do that. Say cd Terraform and then I'll clear the screen for you to see everything that I'm doing. Now let me go ahead and initiate this Terraform init. Now it is initializing the backend. It is downloading all the required things. All right. If you see here, Terraform has been successfully initialized. Let's clear the screen. Now I'll run Terraform plan and let us see what and all the resources it is going to create. So if you see here, it is going to create 22 resources and it is going to output all of them. So if you see all the details here, it is all additional and nothing to destroy, right? So you can read out the plan and you can also create a separate file out of the plan. That's up to you. Now let's go ahead and create the resource. To do that, I'm just gonna issue Terraform apply -- auto approve, and I'll hit enter. Okay, so it says, okay, so it was a typo. I have added 3 P's there, so I'll just remove 1 and I'll hit enter. So this will start creating the resources for me. So if you see here, it is getting all the details and it started creating the resources. So this will at least take 30 minutes or 20 to 30 minutes for the resources to be created. So I'll pause the video here and I'll come back once all the resources are created, and then we can see how to log in and start producing the message and consuming the message. Now if you see here, as soon as I created, I can also see MSK client -key.pem file that was downloaded, which is required in order to authenticate with my server, right, or the EC2 client. So I'll pause the video here and I'll come back once the resources are created. All right, so if you see here, it almost took 28 minutes for the resources to be created, and you can see the outputs here, the bootstrap brokers, the EC2 instance ID, the public IP address, and other information that we had in the output section. Let us also verify this in the console. So let's go to MSK, and if you see here, this cluster is created, my demo MSK cluster. And if you want to view the client information, just click on here and you will see the bootstrap server URL here. And we will also see an EC2 instance created with the name MSK client EC2. Next, let's go ahead and log into this EC2 instance and see how we can navigate through. All right. So let me click on this one and click on connect. And here, let's get into SSH client here. And if you see, this is the command which will help us in logging in. So let me copy that. And what I've done is I've already logged in to my terminal. So if you observe this, I have 2 of the windows. One will act as a producer and one will act as a consumer. So this will act as a producer here. So let me just paste this and make sure that MSK client key is present in this folder where exactly you are working along, right? So if you observe this, here I have my MSK client, and that is exactly where I'm here at the moment, right? So let's also do the same thing here, and it says permission denied, and we do not have that part issue. So let's copy this one and paste it once. Okay, so let me type in ls-lrt and see. Okay, so I think it's inside Terraform. Okay, now let's check if the key is present here. Yeah, we have the MSK client key here. Now let me just clear the screen. Let me type in pwd once and let me get into that folder in the other terminal window as well. Okay. Now let me copy the SSH command here. Let me paste that here, and let me do the same thing on the other end as well. All right. So if you see here, we have logged into the EC2 instance. So now if you remember, we had the user data section where it will also install Kafka in it. So let's verify that. So if I do ls-lrt, you will see Kafka here. So let's get inside that folder, because that's exactly where we want to run the producer and the consumer topics. So we will have to create a topic first and then work along. So let's get into that folder. So if the Bootstrap server has worked or the Bootstrap script has worked fine, only then you will have the Kafka directory created. Okay, so that's one part. Now let's go back to our blog and see what we have next. So first thing, we need to create a Kafka topic. So this is the command to create a Kafka topic. So let me copy that and I'll paste it somewhere here. So let me just paste it here. Okay, so here I need to replace this with the Bootstrap server. So let me just copy all the way from here till here. Okay, so I'll just paste this here. Make sure that you're pasting it correctly, else it won't work. Okay, so I'll remove that and I'll paste it. And now let's copy all the way from here till the start. Okay, now let me get in here. This is where I want to run this. So I'll paste this command and I'll hit enter. So the topic with the name, my first topic, should be created. So let's wait until then. If you see here, it created a topic with the name, my first topic. Now let us go ahead and submit the next command, which is to produce. So in the same terminal, let us start the console producer, and this will give you a prompt like this, where exactly you can produce the message. Okay, so let me just copy this one. Again, we will have to replace the Bootstrap server string. So let me paste that here. Okay, so that it won't confuse you. So let me again copy the Bootstrap server details and I'll paste it here. Okay, so let me do the same thing for the consumer as well, so that we won't waste much of your time. And let me copy this. So if you do not know, these are Kafka CLI commands. So I'm just utilizing that to create and produce and consume the messages at the same time. Okay, let me replace that here. Okay, now first let's copy this producer command. Let me get into the terminal here. Let me clear the screen. Like I mentioned, this will act as my producer and this will act as my consumer. Okay, now let me paste the producer here and I'll hit enter. Let's see. Okay, so it is giving me the prompt. At the same time, let me also copy the consumer and I'll paste the consumer code here. Okay, now here let me type in hello, and observe that as soon as I type hello, you will see the response on the consumer side as well. Okay, so I'll hit enter. Yeah, you see this. Now let me type in how are you. You should see how are you. I will say I am good. You will receive the same message, right? So this is how you can exactly automate using Terraform, which is an incredible tool for you to work along with the infrastructure as code. So this is all I had for this particular demonstration. If you are liking the content that I'm creating, please consider subscribing and share it with your friends. Thank you, and I will see you in the next one.